The Galactic Interspecies Academy of Vareth IV had a cheating problem. Not an unusual one. Where there were exams, there were cheaters, regardless of species. What made this particular incident unusual was the attempted solution. Cadet Voss'Kareth of the Dralhari sovereignty had been caught copying Professor Eileen's quantum navigation midterm from a datapad hidden beneath his secondary forearm scales. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't clever. But Voss'Kareth was third-generation Dralhari nobility, built like a siege engine, armored in natural hide thicker than combat plating, and possessed of retractable claws that could score durasteel. Subtlety had never really been a survival requirement for a species. He had one problem, one witness. Marcus Okafor, exchange cadet, human, Terra, who had been sitting 2 rows back and had seen the whole thing with the kind of flat, unimpressed expression that humans apparently wore when observing something stupid happening in front of them. Voss'Kareth had reviewed the xenobiology files on humans. Twice. He found them reassuring. Soft tissue. No natural armor. No venom resistance. Fragile skeletal structure by galactic standards. Recommend minimal physical engagement. Significant injury risk to human subject from even moderate contact. Moderate contact? He smiled the way Dralhari smiled, which looked to most species like a threat display, because it was. One human. No automate. No weapons. A dark maintenance corridor behind Lab 7, where the security cameras had been malfunctioning for 3 weeks. He checked. It would be quick. It would be quiet. The academic board would find no witness. Voss'Kareth would receive a stern talking to about the midterm, pay whatever fine his family's considerable fortune made trivial, and continue his education undisturbed. He extended one claw. Simple. What Voss'Kareth had not read, what the xenobiology files didn't cover in nearly enough detail, was the addendum buried in the Academy's Human Exchange Program documentation. The part about mature entry candidates. The part that noted, in dry administrative language, that several human nations maintained military service programs, and that some graduates of said programs pursued higher education afterward, and that these individuals had backgrounds the Academy might wish to be aware of. Marcus Okafor, age 31. 8 years, Terran Commonwealth Ground Forces. 3 deployments. 2 commendations. 1 medical discharge following an incident that the file described clinically as significant trauma. Full recovery achieved. He had come to the Academy to study xenodiplomacy. He had a quiet voice and a habit of sitting in the back of lectures. He made decent coffee in the dormitory kitchen and was unfailingly polite to the cafeteria staff. He had also, during his 3rd deployment, spent 11 hours in a collapsed forward position with a fractured radius, 2 broken ribs, and a punctured lung, coordinating his unit's extraction via comm until rescue arrived. The Dralhari files didn't mention any of that. The maintenance corridor behind Lab 7 was, as advertised, very dark. Voss'Kareth struck fast. He was good at fast. Dralhari reflexes were something the xenobiology files mentioned extensively and with obvious pride. He came in from the left, claws extended, and hit Marcus in the side before the human had fully turned. First strike. Clean. Deep. The human made a sound, sharp, involuntary, and staggered against the wall. Good, Voss'Kareth thought. One more and Marcus hit him in the face. Not a glancing blow. Not a panicked flail. A short, compact punch that landed directly on the Dralhari's nasal ridge with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had thrown a great many punches and understood precisely where they needed to go. Voss'Kareth's head snapped back. He tasted copper. He was so surprised that he hesitated for a full second. Then he got angry. What followed was, by any clinical measure, not survivable. Voss'Kareth was not gentle. He was not controlled. He was a predator from a predator species in a blind rage in a dark corridor, and he had claws, and he used them over and over and over because this should have stopped already. This should have ended. Why was the human still? Why was the human still moving? Marcus Okafor had, somewhere in the dark, made a decision. It wasn't a complicated decision. It wasn't strategic or clever. It was the same decision he had made 11 hours into a collapsed forward position with a punctured lung, a decision that existed somewhere below conscious thought, hammered into place by training and necessity until it was less a choice and more a fact. Not yet. He couldn't see well. He couldn't breathe well. Several things that should have hurt more than they did were happening to his body, and some dim, professional part of his brain noted that as a bad sign for later, but an irrelevant one for right now. Right now, there was a target in front of him, and he could still feel the floor under his feet, and as long as both of those things were true, he had a job to do. He found Voss'Kareth's wrist in the dark, the one with the claws. He broke it. Dralhari bone was dense. Marcus had to use both hands and brace against the wall, and it cost him something. He felt it cost him distantly, in the way you feel a bill arrive that you'll have to deal with later, but it worked, and the sound Voss'Kareth made confirmed it had worked. And then Marcus had the wrist locked and the alien off balance, and he put everything he had left into forward momentum and drove Voss'Kareth into the opposite wall hard enough to crack the plating. The Dralhari slid down it. He did not get up. Marcus stood in the dark for a moment, breathing in the careful, shallow way of someone who has become suddenly aware that breathing is a privilege and not a guarantee. Then he activated his comm badge with fingers that were slippery and didn't entirely work. "This is Cadet Okafor," he said, and his voice was remarkably steady for someone in his condition, a fact that would later disturb multiple medical professionals. "Maintenance corridor, Lab 7. I need a medical team and security. In that order." A pause. "Also, I think I found your camera malfunction." They found him sitting against the wall when they arrived. Not collapsed. Sitting, back straight, legs extended, one hand applying pressure to his side in the practice way of someone who has field-dressed wounds before and understands the basic mechanics. Voss'Kareth was unconscious 3 meters away, one wrist bent at an angle that made the first responding security officer, a veteran Chellan with 20 years on the job, stop and stare for a full 2 seconds before remembering to call in. Dr. Prethea, the Academy's chief medical officer, would later describe her examination of Marcus Okafor as the most educational 40 minutes of my 30-year career, and not in a way that suggested she'd enjoyed the education. 53, she said to her assistant, who was taking notes and had gone a shade paler than their species' normal range. 53 what? Lacerations. Claw strikes. 41 superficial. 9 significant. 3 that I am not prepared to discuss in casual conversation. She looked at the human on her table, who was conscious, lucid, and had just asked whether someone could let his xenodiplomacy professor know he'd be missing tomorrow's seminar. He walked here. The medical team. Walked alongside the medical team. Declined the stretcher. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple. He declined the stretcher. Marcus, from the table. I could still walk. That is not, Dr. Prethea said carefully, the threshold most species use for stretcher decisions. Seems inefficient. The academic board convened 3 days later. Voss'Kareth attended with his wrist in a brace, accompanied by his family's legal representative, who had prepared an extensive defense. He did not look at Marcus, who sat across the table looking completely fine, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd looked terrible. The security footage from the functioning cameras at the corridor entrance showed Voss'Kareth entering with clear hostile intent. The security footage showed Marcus leaving, under his own power, after coming for assistance. The security footage of what happened in between did not exist, because the cameras inside the corridor were broken, but the medical report filled in the gaps with clinical thoroughness, and the images attached to the medical report were, the board chair later told colleagues over drinks, deeply unpleasant, and not something she expected to stop thinking about anytime soon. Voss'Kareth was expelled. There was some discussion about pressing charges. This discussion was complicated by the fact that Marcus declined to characterize what had happened as anything more severe than an altercation, a word choice that prompted the board's legal advisor to have a quiet word with him afterward. "Cadet Okafor," she said, "you understand what you could pursue here." "I understand." 53, yes. That is, she chose her words. By any legal standard, any standard, Marcus considered this. He had the air of a man doing quiet arithmetic, weighing things she couldn't see against each other with the patience of someone accustomed to long calculations. "He's expelled," Marcus said finally. "His academic record is done. His family is embarrassed. His wrist is going to take 8 months to fully heal. A pause. I think that's probably sufficient. She looked at him for a long moment. You're remarkably calm about this. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something older than a smile. I've had a few days to think about it, he said. The security footage from the corridor entrance, Voss'Kareth entering, Marcus leaving, was pulled by a second-year Myrati student who was friends with someone on the security staff and shared it to the Academy's internal network before anyone thought to restrict it. By the following morning, every student at Verith 4 had seen it. By the following week, it had spread considerably further. It didn't show the fight. It showed a Dralhari, large, armored, venomous, one of the more physically formidable species in the compact, entering a dark corridor. And it showed a human leaving it, walking, upright, pausing at the exit to press one hand briefly against his side, as though making a note of something, before continuing down the corridor at a measured pace toward the medical wing. Nobody who watched it said anything at first. Then a Chellan third year, watching it for the 4th time, said what everyone was thinking. He already knew, she said slowly. What he called it in, he knew what the scans are going to show, and he still just walked. Silence. Like it was paperwork, said a Myrati cadet faintly. They all thought about this. Somewhere across the dormitory hall, someone had found Marcus's comm number and sent him a message asking, with genuine and slightly desperate curiosity, whether he was doing okay, whether he needed anything, and also, if he didn't mind, what exactly does it take to actually stop a human? Marcus read it, set his coffee down, thought about 11 hours in a collapsed forward position, about a decision that lived below words, about the particular arithmetic of not yet, and not today, and I still have a job to do. He typed back 2 words. Depends who's asking. In the revised xenobiology curriculum, mandatory for all non-human students entering the academy from the following year onward, the section on humans was substantially expanded. The final line of the new entry read, Note, human pain tolerance, psychological resilience, and physical durability under sustained trauma are not anomalies. They are features. Plan accordingly. The section was illustrated with no photographs, at the request of the medical department. The medical department did not explain why. Those who had seen the photos understood.